Hello, hello, hello. We are live. Um, give people 30 seconds just so they can join. If you are here early, come and say hi. Add something into the comments. But yeah, we'll start about kind of 30 seconds past, a minute past. We'll get moving into it. Okay, let's get started. So, hello, everybody. If you are here, thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to this session. This is a topic where I think a lot of people will maybe face challenges, especially if your role is in a global organization, and having to help and support lots of different types of employees. So this could be really interesting. This will be an interesting conversation, and I'm looking forward to getting all of Daniel's advice, experience, knowledge, and also just to hear what he's doing and the challenges he's going through and how he's overcoming those. So, as I said, if you are here and you are listening, please say hello in the comments. We will say hi back. We might even wave if we're conversation. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to write those into the comments, because I will ask Daniel throughout. Anyway, I'll do a quick introduction just in case any of your friends are here, Daniel, who don't know me. My name's Rich. I'm the founder of Employees Health. I run this podcast quite regularly now to help engage people and learn more about what different people are doing so they can take that away and maybe implement that into their workplace. Employees Health, on the other hand, is a workplace wellbeing company. We help people in 3 different aspects. We support wellbeing strategy through activities and workshops and fun bits. We have an optimal wellbeing and performance program for teams and groups of people who want to take their health and lifestyle to the next step and then improve their performance along with that through positive behaviors and best mindsets. And then we also do executive coaching for managers and above. Anyway, that's me done. I'll get into the important part. Daniel, please say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone, and nice to meet you. So yeah, let us know where you're dialing in from, and yeah, I'm looking forward to discussion, Rich, as well.
Perfect. Thank you for coming and joining me on this. I'm looking forward to, from our obviously previous conversation, there's some really interesting bits, and I'm looking forward to just hearing your advice, really. But to start with, let's have a little bit more about you. Give us a bit of a background intro.
Yeah, so I'm the Global Workplace and Wellbeing Lead at Dentsu. If you're not familiar with Dentsu, we're a global marketing advertising agency. So we work with all our clients, building out campaigns, adverts you see on the television, marketing campaigns you may see. So we really support our clients deliver those briefs and those services. I've been with Dentsu now for around about just under 2.5 years, and I'm part of the global HR function, and my role specifically looks at 2 areas. It's what we call our future of work, so hybrid working, how that works, how that lands on different markets, and a large portion of my role is around employee well-being, where I build out the framework and strategy for all of our employees globally, and create the programs to support that as well. Dentsu as a company, so we are Japanese headquartered. Dentsu Japan and also our international markets is headquartered in the UK. We span across around about 140 different markets, and there's about 60,000 of us all together because we've just merged with our Japanese teams or Japanese group, and now one entity is one Dentsu. So it's exciting times for us. Huge transformation going on in the company at the moment, but yeah, lots of opportunity to really be one big, what we call ourselves one Dentsu of the future, and to support our clients across all of our different geographies.
Yeah, wicked. That's one big company across a lot of different markets, and by market you're talking about different countries or
yeah. So markets. If I say markets, I mean countries. Yeah, that's the terminology we use. But we're across all 4 of our regions, what we call 4 regions: so Japan, the Americas, APAC, and also EMEA.
Lovely. So yeah, I mean that must obviously, as the global health and wellbeing manager of that, must bring some challenges.
Yes, lots.
Don't
I
worry,
can
we'll
honestly
get into
say
those
there's,
in a bit more
yeah,
depth later
we'll get into that shortly. But yeah, along with the role itself, it's a great role to be in, because not only am I supporting the agenda around wellbeing, helping and supporting people, but yeah, along with that does come with challenges itself.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Fantastic. Thanks for the introduction. The next bit I want to ask you is kind of your journey to where you are, because I know you've got a bit of a backstory. And so, yeah, could you just give us the journey to the role now?
Yeah, so I currently sit in HR. I'm our global HR, but I don't come from an HR background. I don't have an HR degree. I started my career off as a nurse, so working in the NHS. And I, worked around various different departments around nursing. But then I moved into more occupational health and corporate health. So I went to occupational health working for Transport for London, and that was where back then we in the occupational health really looked at ways to support people within the workforce, keeping them in the workforce, but how to really support them through health promotion as well. I then took a step and worked for Nomura, which is a Japanese investment bank. And this gave me a real sense of how I could use my health knowledge, but in a commercial setting. Again, most banks, investment banks in London, had health centres on site. We were lucky that the health centre was an in-house division. Again, it fell under HR. So my role there was I had two really areas. We had a primary care centre. So we had doctors, physios, dentists, occupational therapists that I oversaw, and as a nurse practitioner, I was able to see, treat, and fully diagnose and assess the employees there with their needs. But also then with that came how else can we support the business? So I was linked in with people like health and safety, business continuity, and acting more a bit of a health consultant in terms of how health can really affect a business, but what's the best way to support employees. And like I said, that really got me into the commercial setting and how I could use my health and see that as a benefit as well. It also brought me into I always think the first stages around well-being back then, because it was there as well. Yeah, it was back then in about 2009. So we're talking way back then. And back then we were just looking at how we could support our employees around just general well-being, around occupational health, stress, etc. But then we're bringing in more like health talks, health fairs, and the early stages of health promotion, but from a corporate aspect. And that's what really gave me the sense of I'd really like to take this further. So again, we used to do the health events for all of our UK staff back then, which was about 4,000. And what I did was create some basic kind of well-being programs around health promotion, around healthy eating, etc. I then decided I wanted to move, so I moved out to Hong Kong, and that was just to get more experience, really, around the health field, but also the well-being field in different locations, understand the culture nuances. But when I moved to Hong Kong, the health and well-being scene was relatively small or virtually non-existent. The health system out there is privatized, so a lot of it is about payer provider paid. And when we talk about well-being back then, it didn't really exist. So I had to find an area that where well-being was growing. And one area was the insurance sector, because they felt that with the health promotion side that could help reduce premiums, and also they were really investing heavily in this. So I went to work for insurers and brokers, acting as more of a health consultant, and that then took me all around Asia Pacific, consulting with multinationals on the health and well-being strategy, working with HR directors, building out those programs, as well as building out the proposition for the companies that I work for, from program development to creating care pathways, as well as things like like telehealth and virtual care, value-added solutions. I then moved back to UK in 2019. 19? Yeah, just before the pandemic. So right just before the pandemic happened, and still supported the job I was doing, but then then moved to Dentsu in my role now.
Nice.
So yeah,
You've been there for a couple of years now, haven't you?
yeah. So been at Dentsu now just under 2.5 years. So like many roles that we saw, I was brought in on the back of the pandemic. So we noticed, Dentsu noticed a real need to support wellbeing. I was brought in then to not only lead on our commitments, but also create that strategy and framework. So a very different route from some HR or some wellbeing leads or heads that you may see. I've come from a very, I'd say, health and clinical route, which has really helped me because I'm able to look at the holistic journey, but really understand how health aspects can affect not only people but as a business as well.
Yeah. Obviously, that fits my background and my values quite a lot because obviously the health link to the employees is probably one of the similar to my background, I guess. Obviously,
Yeah,
not a nurse, but the health promotion, the health understanding of the impacts of health, I guess.
yeah, and yeah. Like I said, that's really so valuable to me, especially when I'm looking at strategy designing frameworks and programs. That's always something I have in the back of my head. And it's given me a great outlook on different things as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Obviously, you've done quite a lot. And I think I had this conversation with Emma Flaxman, who has come sports wellbeing, but she was in marketing, and so I think it's interesting to see where kind of what the type of person is that goes into the wellbeing piece and where wellbeing actually fits and who should be doing it. So it can vary. The key thing is that they have a good understanding of what wellbeing is, and then follow through with the correct strategic thinking, right?
Yeah, that's it. And I think you'll see people like myself, my peers, who all come from different routes and walks of life. And because it's such a new area as well, there's no real defined career pathway for
Mm,
people into these roles. Like you said, Rich, you've got to have a real interest
mm,
within wellbeing, have that good understanding around that, but how to really implement it and also how that fits in with your not only your company,
mm,
but also fits in with your own values as well. And like I said, it's it's a hard role. A lot of the time is you're trying to change behaviors, you're trying to drive change within the business, and as we all know, it's so difficult ourselves, isn't it, to change our habits and things, and it takes a lot. So that's I think
yeah,
it takes a certain person to have that self resiliency, but also that drive to keep on going. And I've always found what keeps me going is the reason I went into nursing, and that's weaved in all the way through my careers. I went to nursing originally to help people because I wanted to make a difference.
yeah,
And I think that's what keeps me motivated, knowing that the role I'm in, I'm really here to make a difference and help people in any way I can. And I always say if I can change one person, that's my job done because
yeah.
it's so hard to change people.
It is. And then when you put do you say 60,000 people in on that list as well, then it gets even harder, right? And
Yeah,
like the cultural effects of well-being, also the difficulties of changing culture is
yeah.
probably really plays out as well, right? Because you just said it, it's so hard to stick to a habit. One person sticking to a habit, let alone 60,000 people buying into the process, buying into the culture, implementing the culture, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you just said the culture is really different from where I've seen working over here back in the UK. It's changed since I first. All my career's been in the UK before I moved to Hong Kong,
Mm,
and the culture around well-being just within the UK has changed since when I moved back in
mm,
2019. But when you take that and look at that in Asia, that's completely different as well.
mm,
How to manage those, and people's, I'd say cultures within different countries around understanding around health and well-being and mental health is completely different.
mm,
And you have got to approach that and meet them where they are.
mm,
But then also we see not only the country cultures within the cultures within offices as well, because that's very
mm,
different. So there's all these different, I would say, cross-cultural nuances that you have to be not only aware of, but mindful of as well.
mm.
And that
And also
sometimes,
everybody's own personal values and egos and all that kind of stuff within organizations or teams as well. So yeah, it's an interesting subject, and this is why it's so hard to do, and people like you are so valuable.
yeah, no, it is. It differs. It's not just one thing.
No,
Well-being.
no.
It's a mixture of everything, but
Mm,
also you're dealing with people. You're
yeah,
dealing with people's emotions, people's thoughts, their behaviors, and that changes. and it can change very rapidly. And it doesn't stay static. As probably everyone on the call probably can know that your thoughts can change rapidly over a day, and that's why it's so difficult. But that's why I found it quite interesting in the past couple of years how well-being has completely changed, and it's keeping me on my toes. To be honest, I'm having to keep up to date with what's going on, and I think it will change, in the next 6 months again and everything. And I think if people have been working in this field quite a long time, like pre-pandemic, I always would say you could really probably figure out what the trends were for next year, perhaps kind of looking ahead. Now, I can honestly say it's a bit of a minefield out there. I really don't know, because just looking back at the beginning of this year, with the Ukraine war and now the cost of living crisis, we wouldn't have anticipated that a year ago, or probably foreseen all these things happening and everything. So it's been a real interesting time over the past 24 months or so, and I think it's only going to change rapidly over time as well. But that makes this area quite exciting for me, anyway.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Thank you. I mean, we're doing pretty well, and we haven't even got into your role yet. So let's just dive into your role. Tell us a little bit more about what you're in charge of, what you do at Dentsu, in a bit more depth. I know we've touched on it a little bit, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, so so I said my role is split into two. So I oversee the future of work globally. So I'll talk about this bit first. When we talk about the future of work, we really look at our position around our ways of working in the future, and that's hybrid working. I think many of you probably are working some form of hybrid today, whether that's you have set days in the office, whether that's you work very flexibly, or whether you work remote, etc. So one big area that I did work on was creating a guidance around hybrid working, for all of our for all of our markets to use, and we specifically called it a guidance rather than a policy, because we knew that there'd be different nuances, but also around the rules and regulations for some of our different countries and markets, where they couldn't fully implement, or they would need legal advice first, whether they could actually have hybrid working in place. So that's why we didn't call it a policy where everybody had to follow. We particularly called it guidance, so then our markets could then take the bits they actually needed to implement their own policies. And we purposely did that. And around that hybrid working, it was like our real focus around the importance, how we're going to support that from building the business perspective, so having the right technology in place so we can be on calls like we are today, etc. So there's that virtual connection, right the way down to thinking about how we plan our days and our works, around having the sustainability, environmental piece, but also well-being pieces as well. One thing we try to build in with that is the notion of team charters, because we know that when you work hybrid, people will have different situations, people's ways of working are different, so we try to incorporate team charters where it was then for teams to decide what works best for them, what works best for the company, and what works best for the team. And so simple things like saying we won't put meetings in before 9 a.m. because that's when we commute. We won't put meetings after 4 because that's when we commute home. It may well be that something simple is that we'll all meet together in the office one day a week, and that's the teams decide. We found that really valuable as well and really useful, because then everybody has a clear picture of how the team should work, and that's one thing we really try to promote around the business, and also around just allowing people to know that we now work in various different states. Some people may prefer to work have a commitments in the afternoon, like childcare, etc. So having that flexibility and choice, and that's what we're seeing. That's our key message around this now, is having that flexibility and choice, and be built into our value proposition around our position around hybrid working. I still working with some of our markets around this as well. Some of our markets are in still 5 days a week, but that's down to the market itself, down to I'd say how they work culturally. But most of our markets are working in some form of hybrid manner. So and look, and again, we're just assessing how that goes. Really, I mean, look, there's only been, I think, no one's cracked hybrid. No one's got the right formula around it. So again, it's through our employee surveys. We're monitoring the success of it, and that will only tell us for the future as well. And I think that's the great thing about us at the moment. It's just having that open thinking around seeing what's working and what's not working. But we know for the moment all of our people want hybrid working and want that flexibility, so that's what we're sticking with.
Yeah, wicked.
The other part is around employee well-being. So again, it's my role is I lead on this globally, and that was looking at creating a strategy or framework around employee well-being, looking at creating some high-level principles, guidances that our markets could follow. And then also in the past year and a half or so, it's been created some key big programs that we could have in place to support our people as well. Some of our markets are very advanced on their wellbeing journey. They may have a lot of resources and solutions in place. Some of our markets have very little in place at all. So what we try to do is it's just being able to support those markets with little resource, but also complement markets who may already have things in place as well, things like EAP, private medical insurance. They may have some already wellbeing programs in place. I guess one of the high-level principles, what we did do a big key thing around how I built my strategy as well as on data. So we use data from our check-in survey, which is our annual employee surveys, and we've got quite an extensive listening strategy now around life cycle employees, getting those touch points from onboarding to offboarding, and that really helps me then figure out kind of what's needed in terms of perhaps program wise, etc. But yeah, so that's kind of where we are today. In terms of the global well-being, I would say we're still at infancy phases. Like I said, I've only been involved for 2.5 years, so it's been about really embedding a culture of well-being. And trying to get people familiar with what well-being means at Dentsu, and then just trying to get that message out to a lot of different markets, really, to really understand that this is important, this is a need, and then just driving that message across in how we can support our people globally.
Yeah, wicked. What's your listening strategy?
So our listening strategy, one of my colleagues, I sit in the employee experience team. So our listening strategy, we have includes our annual employee survey, as well as looking at, we also survey people who've just joined the company at touch points throughout, and then offboarding as well. So again, looking at other key life cycle points that we can collect data from around that. So throughout the year, we don't tend to do I would say like pulse surveys mid-year at the moment, because we don't want to do too much survey to fatigue, etc. But yeah, that's kind of where we are at the moment. We're also building that out over time.
Yeah. I wasn't sure whether you had something ingrained or embedded into the organization. No, but that's cool. Thought I'd ask that. And obviously, using data quite a lot is obviously important to know where you're going as well, right?
Yeah, so it's really important. And I mean, we all try and use data to build. Well, I always try and use as much data as I can to build out a framework or build out a strategy, and that's really important. So that always shows us, or for me, kind of what the need is and what our employees asking, what employees want, what our employees wanting. So having those key data points is really valuable. Also, I use data from conversations I had, so from people in the business talking, and from the programs I deliver as well, so feedback from them. So it's not just one point, so it's not just one data point. I try and get as much data as I can to build out that framework, to build out kind of those programs, etc. But yeah, I would say any kind of data you can get as a starting point is really valuable. And if not, do focus groups, because just get the employee's voice, ask them what they're needing, what they're wanting. I've so many times what I think they've needed, they haven't needed, and I've realized after speaking to people, it's like this is not what I was thinking. So always be prepared for that, but also be prepared to be open as well to change.
Yeah, wicked. Great advice. I know obviously we've got potentially quite a lot to go through, because I'm going to ask you about your strategy in a second. But thanks for sharing that. It's interesting that you've got kind of the two sides of that role. I think both sides of your role impact employees' well-being for future of work and the hybrid model. Because I think a lot of people, and I still think a lot of people now will say that's one of the biggest impacts on their well-being. And I think it's proper, a proper challenge from a business standpoint, because internal beliefs to how people work best, and also understanding how do the company work best as well, which you're trying to manage as well. And that's why I think, as you said, the hybrid model is nobody's perfected it yet. And so consistently listening, as you said, I think if you're doing that well, then you'll probably create the best thing for the organization.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think it is about, it's such a new concept, isn't it, hybrid working? And we've always had flexible working arrangements, but those have been very contractual.
Mhm.
Or you've been a remote worker, haven't we? And it's, for everyone to now work in this hybrid way, when there's no blueprint or there's no guidebook on how to do it,
Yeah.
it's really difficult. But I think it comes down to, you need to figure out what works best for your company, and also what works best for your people, but also stick to it as well. Because I think, we've seen many companies go from a very flexible approach to now mandating back days, etc. And all that change only causes more, I would say, anxieties within their employees, because you're almost taking something away they previously had. But also, it's that amount of change going on. It's like people just are on top of what's going on externally at the moment globally. It's just causing so many issues, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you hear it from people, it's very much that's the stress, isn't it? It's like, we had flexible working, now we're 3 days, now they're saying 4 days and potentially 5.
Yeah.
And that's what's causing the stress, right? Consistent change. It's like when we went to lockdown, nobody liked that change. We kind of got used to it after a while, and then back into work, and it's all that change consistently. Nobody's happy with.
Oh, and I think we're seeing that, aren't we? We're seeing people not happy with their work, with their work. I mean, that's how we're seeing people, leave their jobs and everything. But also seeing people driving this change as well, like our younger generations. They're wanting this flexibility. They're wanting, being able to not be confined by 5 days a week in the office. And but they've grown up. Now they've grown up with it. People just out of university have grown up with hybrid working, haven't they? So it's something they're going to expect. Something they're going to expect kind of when they go into the workforce as well. But it's a very difficult time, I think. But I think for companies, when they're looking at this hybrid working, it's being clear on what hybrid means for them. We know some roles obviously can't be, some roles may need to be in the office more so than others. And some companies, they may need to be a 5 day within a company. So if you look at the NHS and things, they may not be able to do hybrid working, etc. in some service industries. But it's about, I think, really defining what hybrid means for you as a company, and also sticking to it as well.
Yeah.
And then assessing it over time.
Yeah, 100%. All right, I know, as you said, we've got quite a bit to go into. So we're going to look at your wellbeing strategy next. Let's dive into it. And I think the best place to start is the start. So before you even kind of put your first thing in, you obviously started Dentsu 2.5 years ago. Where did you start? What was the first process?
I think the first place is really looking at assessing the need. What is it they're wanting to achieve, and what was it we're looking at as well. I think that's like kind of any strategy, is doing that needs assessment. Kind of what is it we want to, I guess, what is it you want to look at, and those perhaps what outcomes would we want to see.
Can you go into depth with that? So what was?
Yeah, and again, couple that with data. But also things we're seeing within our business is poor mental health, high levels of burnout. As you can imagine, the advertising industry is very, very busy for people. That's what to say, a lot of industries we see burnout and mental health, but that was one thing we actually saw as well. And we also saw the need to start addressing that within the business. So it was really like looking how we can start normalizing the conversation or normalizing mental health. And then seeing how we can look at tackling that. So I think that was the real first kind of assessment, but also then around what would that look like in terms of commitments. Some key commitments that we could put in originally to support our people, and a few areas that we really looked at to support that piece was upskilling our managers around mental health and well-being, implementing mental health first aiders. We already had implemented in the UK, so looking, and we saw some good successes to that. So then looking at how we can then, I'd say, globalize that, and then coupled with data as well, because we found that people wanted more time off for their well-being, people wanted more development in that. That was seen through our results. So again, one thing we did do is then look at implementing what we call wellness days for our people, where people could take days off for our well-being. I think with any strategy, though, I always say it's a living document. It's a document that breathes, and it can't stay static. And then, looking at the next piece was then how do you look at embedding that through the business, incorporating what those pain points are, and how do you really look at those? And then that was my next step in terms of how do we start embedding well-being around creating clear narrative, around creating those clear messages, what well-being was at Dentsu. So we had that in place. And for me, creating a bit of a brand around well-being. So everything I see, I branded myself. For my PowerPoint presentations, the messages I send out, there's always a clear brand to say this is well-being. And then, like I said, I've been there 2.5 years, so say now in year 3, looking at past data. It's really looking at what programs we can then put in place around that to support our people. So if we look back at 22, we onboarded around about 17,000 new headcounts across the globe. So again, you can imagine they're having varying different levels of understanding our well-being. So I stripped it back and started to get people to understand the real foundations of well-being. So that's things like sleep, hydration, nutrition, etc., to really get them to understand that, because I saw that, and this is again people wanting more, expressing more around holistic well-being, seeing that once people understand and how to manage their own well-being, that should make them happier, which helps support a happier workforce, culture, etc.
Yeah, having those basics behaviors in place. Well, the knowledge of that is great. Then it's the implementation, which normally another hurdle, but that's personal well-being. So we'll move on. Okay, wicked. So that's the start, and that's kind of giving you a bit of an outline for where you are now, and you are obviously still at the start of it. But let's look into your strategy in a bit more depth. So you've kind of you've got these, you got all the information you needed, and you've kind of expressed some of this stuff. But what's involved in this strategy so far?
So I guess what's involved is, if you look firstly about the culture piece. So like I said, culture is trying to embed well-being into Dentsu, really, and create that culture, because I would say we didn't have a culture of well-being. So again, that includes speaking to all of our different markets, really getting them to understand what well-being is. Like I said, some markets there have very little awareness around well-being. Some markets, perhaps even the word doesn't exist. So it's about really trying to deliver key messages around that, and then use our communications networks to really help drive that message across as well. So that was one big thing, and then looking at that, understanding what each market has, or trying to understand what the larger markets, what they have as resource in place, and try to see what those gaps are, really see where we could plug in anything they may, or plug in and support, or complement kind of what they already have in place as well. So that was probably what I was doing, probably trying to do that and just do a needs analysis, really, of what are the things that we have in place and what are the things we could actually look to implement to help support that as well. I guess when we look at that, we saw an increase in our engagement scores last year, of around, so we always ask a few questions around support, awareness, and we saw roughly a +5 increase from the year before. So which is really good to see. So people were aware of what's available to them, people were aware of the support, but that really showed us that we'd started to create um, a culture of well-being, and people felt that they were being supported in place in the workforce. Again, as that's gone on, it's been then looking at what else can we really do, and what key programs can we have in place to continually support our people as well.
Yeah, cool. I'm guessing that's probably the future, the next step of your journey.
Yeah, so that's it. So again, we're just so our global survey is running at the moment. So will run till mid-October. So again, once I get the data from that, that will really help me in decide what those next steps will look like, and things. I think our key programs we have in place already will keep running. So things like I said, our mental health first aiders, our continual training and support around our leaders, and also our wellness days. But then next steps in terms of what is it they really want, I don't know. And I think that's, like I said, that's why the well-being strategy, when you're looking at programs, you need to be flexible with that, because times are changing. We're being influenced by external factors, so we need to be a little bit agile in terms that's how best we can support workforces.
Yeah, no, the things you said, I think being adaptable, and listening to your staff then builds that future. But you have a really good solid foundation so far.
Yeah, I think that's it. Just trying to build out that foundation. I think also, just if anyone looking to start their strategy as well, is starting off small, and trying not to do too much, because I think we can run the risk of overwhelming people with too much. So again, it's starting off small and then building it gradually over time. So I think that's really important. That's one thing I've tried to do is, and then constantly evolve, constantly adapt.
Yeah, wicked. Perfect. You said something earlier, which I wanted to just to ask the question, because you do deal with cross markets, cross borders. You're going to have lots of potential pushbacks, and maybe difficult conversations. And you hear this a lot within wellbeing, the fact that some people aren't listened to, especially at board level. What's that like for you? How do you overcome your challenges of buy-in at board level and cross markets?
I guess that's a difficult one. To be honest, it's difficult because if you look at it from a senior leadership level, they've got so many priorities going on, haven't they? Business priorities, etc. But also, like for us, like I said, we're going through some significant change at the moment. So it's about trying to get it on their agenda as much as I can. And really relaying the importance of that as well, but also any touch points that you have that may show value around your programs, around or even employee sentiment, whether that's positive or negative. That's something I always feedback. So it's creating that picture of what's going on at the moment in this time, and backing up with any type of data that we can, just to show, look, this is a real issue for us at the moment. So like I said, look, we're going through some huge change at the moment. So it's about saying to our leaders, look, if we're not careful, our people won't be able to manage, or they're not coping. And we're seeing this through X, Y, Z. So, it's showing them the real true facts of what it's like. Again, when you're getting pushback from different markets, and that you're always going to get that. And that's down to, again, maybe their understanding, maybe they're not ready for it. But I think what I've always done is it's just being able to meet them where they are. to be honest, and try not to push things on them, because that will never work. So I don't expect, if they're not ready for a program or not ready to join, it's not something I make compulsory or mandatory. It's about looking at ways we can support them at this moment in time, and maybe they will be ready in the future. And I think a great example of this is our mental health first aiders. Even though it is a global program, it is a global program, it's not rolled out globally to all of our different markets. Because what I do is I not only assess them first for their readiness, their need, also their understanding, but also what they may have already in place. But also knowing that if they don't meet certain criteria, this isn't ready for them now, and then working with them, to get that awareness up first within that country, and then building on that kind of with the program afterwards. So again, it's like the two-way. When we look at markets, sometimes when you do get pushback, it's something that you're going to find, but always try and find out the reasons why. That's the reason. That's what I always try to do, and sometimes it may not work. So it's about meeting them where they are, but also what I try to do is, with the well-being, is try to empower the markets to take what we have globally and use those to adapt them with those cultural nuances, etc. So they really land within that part of the business.
Yeah, that's wicked. That's great advice as well. Thank you. I'm going to move on because I know we're going to overrun a little bit. I was like keep it to about 45 minutes, but we'll overrun by kind of potentially 5 minutes. I wanted to highlight some of your big achievements, just because I think it gives people an opportunity to see what you're doing. And I know you've mentioned some of this stuff before, so could you just mention those kind of real big achievements, the things you're kind of most happy with, and then kind of mention why they're such big achievements and what the impact's been?
Yeah, I think I just I'll probably name a couple. I think one of the biggest ones was around one of our, what we call our programs. It's our wellness days. So the wellness days are days that people can take to support their well-being anytime throughout the year. Every employee gets up to 3 days. So across all of our markets. And again, that was on the back of data where we saw that people ask for more dedicated time off for well-being. And I know a lot of companies during that COVID time we saw companies give a week off for well-being, or a few days here and there. But ours is continual. So as soon as you join a business, regardless of your level, regardless of your state, who you are, you get them straight away, and that's every single year. And people may think it's quite easy, just give 3 days, but it's not. And I think the reason why is because, firstly, we had to convince a lot of our senior leaders why we needed this, why it was so important, and the value of it. Look, a lot of our people work in client-facing roles as well, so to take them perhaps off a pitch can be quite significant, or taking a day off sometimes. So it was about getting why we're doing this, but also the commitment. And then from operational point of view, finance, giving people 3 days extra per year on top of their annual leave, and at Dentsu we get some significant annual leave anyway, and leave type. So again, building 3 extra days into someone's overall, I would say, employee package around remuneration, etc. Was we had to convince them as well. And then from operational level as well, in terms of, we use systems so people can take the day, etc. So we had all the right correct ways to request a time off. So it wasn't just as simple as just giving people the extra days. It's all, I would say, all the admin, operational, and convincing we had to do afterwards. And some of our markets, they have what we call unlimited leave. So again, giving them 3 extra days when you already have unlimited leave doesn't make sense. It's about how can they work best with that, kind of how can they support that, how can they implement those days when they already can take unlimited leave as well. So when you've coupled that all these issues, it was a bit of an achievement, I would say. And we've been rolling. What we always do is we always anchor one of our wellness days in October around World Mental Health Day, and that allows me to do a campaign around that to not only raise awareness of mental health within the business, what we're doing, but it always allow a bit. It's a true global event where we all come together, and what we try to do is we try to encourage our markets to collectively take the same or around that period off. So again, everyone is switching off and disconnecting together. Now that doesn't always work. We understand that, so we do give that flexibility around that period. But we're coming up to our third year. But last year, over that period, there was a 60% reduction in emails being sent across that period. So we knew how the impact it was having. People were switching off. People were not sending emails, not working. And the employee sentiment we get back after that is people felt really valued. People loved the day. People were able just to support themselves. So I think that's one of the biggest achievements we've had in my role so far.
Yeah, nice.
And
is there any requirements when you're having a wellbeing day? Do you have to prove that you're actually having a wellbeing day, you're not just having a day off, or is there anything like that, or is it just having a day off?
So you just agree like with your manager. So yeah, you need to ask your manager's approval, who then we put it in our system, and if they approve it, then that's fine. So again, it may be you just say maybe for some people they've had a busy 2 weeks or a few weeks on a stressful pitch, and they just need that day off. If they can have that day off, they can. So again, yeah, so really, and we don't stipulate what you can use that day for. You can use it for anything. Some people have use it just to recharge, and or do what you need to do to support your well-being. So we've not put any what it can be used for, what it can't be used for. It's a flexible day for you to use to support your well-being, like I said, but we always anchor one in October, so we can collectively globally come together.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. I guess then we've discussed this probably throughout, but biggest challenge?
It's quite a few.
How long we got, Rich?
Yeah, how long we got? I think that a few challenges around this. I think we're seeing at the moment is budget. Budget constraints around well-being, and that's difficult in itself. So that's one constraint. I think because you work in a global role, it's just so complex as well, in terms of trying to support markets at varying different degrees, who have very different degrees and levels of either provisions around well-being or understanding around well-being. So again, that can be a challenge in itself, and markets working in silos. That's difficult. And again, it's just, I think well-being is difficult, Rich, and I think you probably see that yourself. Well-being is not easy as a role in itself. It takes a lot of engagement. It takes a lot of, for myself, it takes a lot of, making sure everything's running smoothly, getting everything right. And yeah, it's just a role. It can be quite difficult, and just as a general role. Because like I said, you're dealing with people, and you're dealing with people's thoughts and emotions that change. So I'd say, yeah, that would probably be my challenges at this moment in time. And I think just with everything happening at the moment, externally, globally wise, so things like cost of living crisis we're going through, all the uncertainty that we're living with, and everything, that's just that has impacts on the role. So yeah, that's probably a few of my key challenges.
I'm going to follow that question up, just to see if you have got any how you're going to overcome those. Have you got any things that you're going, okay, we're going to try and do this to overcome that challenge, or we've got budget restraints, where we're going to get our budget from, or obviously the cross market situations, we're going to try and do this. Is there anything, so you've got all these challenges, is there anything you can give out to the people watching?
Yeah, so I guess kind of where with our markets, what we're trying to do this year is So with any of our comms, with any of our marketing globally, what we try to do is create editable assets that we can team up our local markets with, so they can really, I guess, tailor anything to accommodate those nuances or those cultural differences. Again, so like I said, with our global programs or communications, as one thing we've done this year is to really empower the markets to take on those messages themselves. So again, and hopefully with that, then that will not only help them get that message across, but also the understanding around the well-being at Dentsu. So that's one thing. I guess again with the markets, like I said, it's about meeting them where they are. And if they're not ready for it, it's just about supporting them the ways I can with our programs, etc. And what I've done more this year is work with some of our key more with our leaders, really driving the message around why well-being is so important. So I work with our leadership teams. We have some key global leadership programs or experiences, and it's about getting that message through to our leaders and our leaders of the future that they have a really good opportunity to change and drive well-being. So that's one thing you could do as well. I guess with the budget, it is about if you need to build a business case, it's looking at the why, the how, but also what the impact can have. So again, if using any data points that you have, whether it be attrition or whether that be from the employee sentiment you have already, and really building out to an overall picture, because I think that's what you need to see the impact it can really have, and that can really help support that case as well. And then I guess the people in roles like myself, and why I say that it's a challenging role, is take it easy on yourself. I think we can always put too much pressure on ourselves, because it is difficult. And the time in the current time we're living in, it's not it can make this role harder sometimes. So yeah, take it easy on yourself. I think that would be one of my biggest key takeaways for people who like yourself, because these roles can be quite lonely sometimes. I think sometimes as pups we're in lone roles. So yeah, it's not easy in itself. So yeah, so take it easy and don't put too much pressure.
Yeah, long game.
Yeah.
As you said, potentially long, lonely game as well. I think I completely agree with you that one there. I think we live so much in the moment that we forget the big picture and cultural shifts, well-being implementation, and the engagement change is a process. And if your organization is as large as your organization, that's just going to take time. It's just step after step. Remember the big picture. Remember, like, Rome wasn't built in a day.
No, and I think that's it. It's a long journey. Well-being is, and it's not a quick fix. You're not going to change things overnight, but it will take, as I said, it will take time. But take those small steps, and use this time to pilot things. I keep thinking we're in a great time at the moment to not only to stop, try things out, see if they work. If they don't work, change it or modify it or try something different. Because I think we always say, like, we're in a great position to change the way we work for better in the future and to support kind of our own well-being. So there's no rush, I don't think, personally, on all of this. So yeah, just take the time you need and figure out what works best. But don't be afraid to try things new, and don't be afraid to change direction if it's not working.
Yeah, great advice. Okay, we're going to finish or begin to finish up. So I always ask all of our participants, guests, this same question: what are your top 3 take-home bits of advice when it comes to supporting well-being, and specifically around your role as a global health and wellbeing manager?
Yeah, I think firstly, look after yourself.
Mhm.
I think that's really important. It's, like I said, it's a tough world out there. So again, my top advice is make sure that you're looking after yourself, because I think in our roles we look after a lot of people, don't we? And we can forget about ourselves. So yeah, and I put my hand up. Sometimes I forget about myself, but then I realize I need to take some time out to really support my own health and well-being. Otherwise, I can't be in a position to help others, or be having, you know, the right energy levels, the right thinking around what I need to do. I think the second one, like I just mentioned, time. Um, Take the time you need, pause, think about what it is, your big picture, think about what it is you need to, what is you're wanting to look for, perhaps what you're looking to strive for, what outcomes you're looking for. So have a think about that. As also feelings. What do you want your company to feel like as well? Because that can really help. But yeah, take that time to really answer those questions around what you're wanting to achieve. And I think, there's lots of different strategies, there's lots of different focus areas, or things you can do around well-being, but you're the one who knows what works for your company. Every company is different. So don't just go with the next newest, shiniest thing. Kind of think about how that would land within your company. How would your people feel about it, etc. So yeah, take that time to really think about those few questions, and then that's 2, isn't it? And then I guess the last one really would be, my other key takeaway is, if you are on your, if you are just on your, journey around, or in your initial stages of starting a well-being strategy, don't just go on hard data. I think look at all the soft data you can incorporate into it. So things like, perhaps, like, when I say soft data, it's about having those conversations with people. Think about how, if you're building any experiences in that, how have they been supported through that experience, and build those into your strategy as well. Not just perhaps looking at the hard data that we may have, or when I say hard data, the numerical data that we may have, because you want to get a true picture of what's going on. And sometimes just having a conversation with someone can really help you think, oh wow, I didn't think about that. I need to, how can I incorporate that piece into my framework as well? So yeah, those are probably my 3 bits of advice for people on the call.
Do you know what? You're not the first person in a role like yours who just said look after yourself first. So the double whammy, and may even be triple whammy on that one, I think. No, thank you, Daniel. I really appreciated your time. Great bits of advice throughout, and great insights shared. So thank you for giving me your time to share this information. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rich. And yeah, like I said, everybody out there, thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody listening, the next one, we've got 2 coming up in October. One with Paul from Saudi Arabia, talking about the kind of similar, but the cultural differences, and how you can support people with from different cultures. And then another one looking at how to simplify well-being. So yeah, please keep an eye out for these. But otherwise, it's a thank you from me, and Daniel, I really appreciate your time. Thank you. See you guys later. Bye-bye.